some questions. Steve Gales.
Hey, David. We've been talking a lot to Carlos about his balancing act between utilizing information, but also his gut and what he sees. When you were going through the interview process, how much did you know that aspect of him, and did that in any way make him more appealing to you as you were looking for a manager?
I think one of the things that made Mendy so appealing throughout the interview process was his ability to read situations. That's both in game and in a clubhouse with people, understand how human beings are going to react in different situations. And I think we've seen that play out over the course of the first month of the season, both in terms of how he's managing the clubhouse and how he's managing in game. And so this is what we expected. And I think he's doing a really good job.
There is at least the perception that many front offices nowadays would prefer a manager just stick to what the information says and play the odds. Is that a misconception, or is this organization right now somewhat unique in that regard?
I can only speak to the organizations I have experienced, and I think based on my experience in the game, there's a little bit of a misconception there. I think we do want to base decisions on information, and we want evidence-informed decisions. That's something we talk a lot about as an organization, is making evidence-informed decisions. But information and evidence come in a variety of different forms, and I think Mendy is in a very good spot to determine how to balance and weigh different forms of evidence at any given decision point.
So with regard to all of that, when Carlos came out to go to the mound yesterday afternoon, did you expect him to come back with Jose?
I didn't know, to be honest with you. I think whenever you see a manager come out from the dugout, you expect a pitching change. I then noticed that he didn't signal to the pen immediately, and so I figured there was going to be a conversation. And from that point, I didn't know which way Mendy was going to go. The nice part about being in the front office at those situations is you don't have to make that decision. I have to make enough decisions in this job, and so I'll leave that one to Mendy.
So the obvious follow-up then is, what did you think when he kept him in, regardless of how it turned out?
I trusted that Mendy was reading the situation correctly, and I trust that he's going to take into account all of the information he has in that moment at his disposal and make the best judgment possible.
Well,
David, so what happens if that decision doesn't work? What's the process for sort of unpacking like what went wrong?
If the decision doesn't work, it doesn't mean that anything went wrong. So I think the conversation that occurs is the exact same whether the decision works or doesn't work. We talk about the decision-making process, not the outcome of the decision.
Tony?
Just to follow up on that, I guess how much latitude then does, because he has made some decisions that go against the book. They've generally worked. At some point, one or two of them won't work. How much latitude does he have to do that, to continue doing that?
I mean, Mendy has the latitude to make decisions in game, and so he has that's the job of a major league manager, and so we hired him because we believe he is very well situated to do that, and I think he's proven that.
Tim?
With Marte expected back tomorrow, do you see a spot on the roster for Mark Vientos?
I think we'll see what happens when Marte gets back. One thing I've learned in this job is don't make a decision until you have to make a decision. And so when that point comes, we'll make a decision.
What do you make of these starting pitching right now and sort of how they've had these short outings? Yes, the bullpen has been good, but is that sustainable?
So over the course of the year, we will need to get a little bit more length out of our starters. This isn't terribly unusual in April. I think we've had a couple of games over the course of the season where we've given up a bunch of runs early, but our guys, for the most part, have been able to get us into that fourth or fifth inning, and so you haven't had too many of those super short starts that can really tax your pen. But sure, we'd like to see our starters getting a little bit deeper. I think while our bullpen has picked up a pretty substantial load, no individual pitcher has picked up a load that I would consider to be concerning. I think we've been able to distribute that load in those innings pretty well, both through how Mendy and our coaching staff have managed games and for how we've managed the roster and tried to get fresh arms here as often as possible.
Are you encouraged by, potentially McGill and Senga coming back at the end of the month and Peterson later?
Sure. Yeah, I think that we've got McGill, Senga on the way back, Petey on the way back, Max Kranick now back in AAA. A couple of the prospects throwing the ball pretty well in AAA. Yes, I think we've got the emergence of some depth there that we thought we were going to have coming into the season and then took a hit right at the front end. And that's a good feeling.
Mike.
What have you thought of Christian Scott, and could he be somebody we're talking about pretty soon here?
Yeah, I think Christian's done everything we could have hoped and expected. He continues to throw the ball very well. And look, I think there's this balancing act when you call up a prospect versus of when is the prospect ready and then when is there the major league need. And often those need to overlap and intersect. And for some guys down there, we're probably just waiting for that intersection to occur.
And also, Senga indicated he thought, May 27th, the first day he's eligible, that it would be right around that date. Do you think it'll be in May, or is it probably pushed into June?
I think it would be difficult for me to say with any accuracy whether it's that last week of May or early in June. We've got to kind of see how these next couple of lives go and then plot out what that rehab schedule is going to look like in terms of rehab outings and the number we want there. But last week of May, early June, I think given where we are is a realistic time frame.
Tim.
You've mentioned that 45-game evaluation period that you like. Would you make a change in the rotation in a everyday lineup spot before that point in any circumstance?
Sure. If we thought it was in the best interest of the team and the organization, yes.
What kind of things would prompt that kind of decision?
I think there are a number of factors that would get into it, but at the end of the day, if we think we have enough information on a move to make a move of substance to put us in a better chance to win games, we would do it.
You spoke about evidence-informed decisions before. Adrian Hauser's been struggling. How much more do you need to see before a potential decision is made for a veteran pitcher like that?
Yeah, I think House has a nice track record in this league of being able to give quality outings and give a team a chance to win. He's done that for a long time. I've seen him do it for a long time. And I've also seen him go through some challenging stretches and be able to battle through it. So I certainly think that House is going to work his way through this.
David, given the success that Garrett has had, however surprising it might be, is there a fine line that you walk between thinking about leaving him in the role that he's been in because he's been so successful at it and there's always a need for a multiple inning guy, with perhaps giving him more of a conventional one late inning role where you could utilize it potentially back-to-back instead of 2 innings and then maybe you have to sit him for a day or two?
I don't necessarily think it needs to be an either or. I think it's sort of what the game calls for in that situation. The role that Reed's been filling to this point, I think is incredibly valuable. It's been multiple innings at high leverage points in the game. And it's either kept us in a game or last night allow us to win a game. That he has 5 wins already, I think speaks to the leverage points that he's been put in. So he's certainly one of our high leverage relievers right now. And I think it's working pretty well. There may be games where he only goes an inning and then he can come back to back. But I don't know that we necessarily feel the need to pivot his role intentionally into that more 1 inning, more regular appearance type role.
Anthony.
When
Vientos went down at the end of spring training, one of the things you mentioned was that he wanted to see continued defensive development. How was his first few weeks down there in that regard?
I think at times it was really good, and there were at times some mistakes as well. And that's going to be natural. That's part of a natural progression.
I think when Mendy was hired, you guys could talk kind of hypothetically about if we like to work together and manage and that sort of thing. Then when the game started, it becomes real. There's like real stakes involved with wins and losses. He said your relationship has stayed consistent during that time. Is it natural for it to change at all for a GM and a manager once the games start counting like that, or how would you describe the dynamic of you two going into that?
Yeah, I think consistent's a good way to put it. I think Mendy's a pretty consistent guy. Like I said the last time we spoke, like he likes to have fun. He likes to smile. I'm a pretty consistent guy. I don't get too high or too low over the course of a season. So I think that works well together. And I think it allows us to have constructive conversations and hopefully help us as an organization as a whole get better.
I mean, from our seats when he was hired, we kind of considered it a risk bringing in a first-year guy like that. I'm sure you considered it more of a calculated risk. Mm-hmm. Did you think it was a risk at the time, or did you feel that kind of trust with him? Or is it pouring out now? I
think what I'd say is I had confidence in our hiring process. We went through an extensive process that a lot of thought went into how we structured our hiring process. And so I trusted that, and I trusted that we hired a really talented manager, and I think he's done a really good job.
You mentioned that his ability to read situations kind of stood out during that process. How do you gauge that in an interview process?
Through a lot of hypotheticals, through asking about certain situations, and then through a lot of reference checks, and talking to people who have been around him in the game for a long time at all different levels. And you do your best to try to put a puzzle together of who this person is.
Mark, David, just what have you made of AD's first month of the season or so, where he started off pretty well and has sort of pulled down a bit since then?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'd highlight with Brett is how he's played defensively. And I think we're seeing him continue to improve defensively, continuing to get more comfortable over there, making not only the routine play, but also sometimes the really difficult play. And that's been really encouraging for us. Offensively, you're right. I think he got off to a really good start. A little bit cooler of late since he's come back from missing a few days with the hamstring. That's part of a baseball season, and this is part of what young players have to go through to really establish themselves is fight through stretches like this and get back to where they feel good at the plate.
Joe, just going back to Vientos, have you liked his attitude, his demeanor since, again, getting demoted to AAA and coming back up here?
Yeah, Mark has handled himself very well. He was very understandably disappointed when we sent him out at the end of camp, but he went down to AAA, worked hard, has been a good teammate, and so he's handled himself very well.
Well, you made a handful of roster cuts early on in the offseason, but Reed Garrett stayed, of course. I know we had the minor league option. Was there anything else, or what else went into that decision to hold on to him?
Yeah, I think a lot of different factors play into that, where they are from an option perspective, and also what type of talent and potential growth opportunities may exist. This was a player who was claimed last summer for a reason. Our development staff felt like they were beginning to make some progress in some of those changes, hearing about who Reed was as a person, and understanding his commitment and determination to make some of these changes and to improve was compelling. And I think giving him the latitude to do that, to really take ownership of his career, and our player development staff and our pitching development staff really guiding the process has yielded pretty good returns here.
Last from Abby.
what changes did he have to make, and what changes have you seen pay off for him?
So he's revamped his arsenal a little bit, and I think he has understood who he is as a pitcher and what elements of his arsenal work to right-handed hitters, what elements of his arsenal work to left-handed hitters. And there's been a mentality shift, and he's talked about it both internally and publicly. Pitching is a lot easier when you get ahead, and he's really focusing on that. He's been able to do that. And I think as this stretch has gone on, he's gained confidence in different ways to get ahead. It's not always pumping in 0-0 fastballs, which at the big league level, guys will figure out. He's got enough variety in what he can do where he can attack the strike zone in different ways, get ahead, and put himself in a really good spot.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.